A billion metric tons of cheering organisms roared across the crucible of 1,000 regrets. The arena, if one could call a half-ruined Dyson sphere festooned with lava fountains, anti-gravity pockets, and at least 3 screaming moons, an arena, hovered in contested orbit around a dying red giant. Its purpose was clear to all: resolve interstellar disputes with blood, claws, and ratings. In the past 5 cycles, the Intergalactic Combat Championships had seen the dismemberment of 12 noble houses, the marriage of a sentient volcano to a crustacean aristocrat, and the rise of celebrity chef warriors on 3 planets. But today, the stakes were higher. Meme rights, asteroid claims, and, most absurdly of all, the credibility of humanity. From the perspective of most galactic species, humans were charmingly incompetent. They couldn't photosynthesize, laid live births instead of eggs, and drank fermented liquids for pleasure despite clear warnings from biology. Their weapons were outdated. Their language was inefficient. Their diplomacy relied heavily on passive aggression and thinly veiled sarcasm. Yet here they were, inexplicably climbing the ladder of interstellar relevance, largely due to their uncanny ability to survive things they absolutely should not. Today, that ability was being tested. The crucible seats were filled with delegates from hundreds of species. Some were gaseous and floated in containment pods. Others were crusted in crystalline exosuits or oozing calmly through symbiotic fluid sacs. They watched the arena with multifaceted eyes, echolocating pings, and psychic resonance. Everyone loved a good execution. And everyone knew that today's execution would be a spectacle. After all, the Korzek had never lost. Karothk the Sublime, warlord of 9 regimes, stepped onto the outer ring of the battlefield. He was a walking sculpture of terror, 9 feet tall, plated in obsidian-scaled armor grown directly from his spine. His 3 arms each gripped a different kind of weapon, one serrated, one glowing, one humming with low-frequency murder. His tusks jutted forward like ivory war banners, each inscribed with a battle he'd won by decapitation. He raised his central arm, and the crowd screamed in 17 different sonic registers. A cluster of fan species released hallucinogenic pollen in celebration. Commentators from the galactic broadcasting matrix floated nearby, their voices echoing through the arena's neural translation field. And there he is, the undefeated terror of the Eastern Spiral Arm, crooned a sentient cube known only as Yabnob. Karothk the Sublime, killer of kings, drinker of foes, nightmare of small moons. Indeed, responded a second voice, dry and glutinous, belonging to a retired war philosopher embedded in a vat. He once destroyed a fleet by glaring at it too hard. Spectacular specimen. One wonders, Yabnob, what sort of opponent they've summoned to challenge such glorious destruction. Oh, you're going to love this, Yabnob purred, antennae twitching. It's a human. A brief silence passed across the arena, like a galactic intake of breath followed by a sneeze of disbelief. Then laughter erupted, echoing, hissing, gurgling. Even the lava geysers seemed to chuckle. A small access hatch hissed open on the opposite side of the crucible, and out stepped something remarkably unremarkable. She stood just under average height for her species, clad in a battlesuit clearly patched more times than was considered safe. Her gait was casual, shoulders relaxed, arms loose. No heavy arsenal slung across her back, no dazzling technospear or phase shield halo. Just a long-barreled object in a padded case, and a compact glove with small silver contacts running up each finger. Ellie Voss looked up toward the noise. She blinked once against the ambient firelight, adjusted her visor slightly, and then yawned. The universal translator fed her the sounds of the crowd, a rich chorus of derision and untranslatable profanity. Ellie didn't mind. To her right, a small creature clattered nervously on 6 legs. Its carapace was decorated with diplomatic pins, and its voice sounded like 2 beetles arguing inside a metal thermos. This was Thib, her official liaison from the Terran Galactic Alliance Integration Committee, Temporary Subcommittee, Human Military Representation. Statistically, this is very inadvisable, Thib buzzed, wringing 2 of his hands. You were ranked 4th most likely to be pulped in the first 30 seconds. I advised your leaders against submitting an entry. There was a whole memo. Ellie didn't look at him. They probably didn't read it. Thib's carapace clicked in anguish. Do you at least have a strategy? Yes, she said, and clicked open her rifle case. A sleek, matte black railgun rested inside, stripped of all unnecessary parts. No aesthetic engraving, no glowing lines, no gratuitous energy signature. Just coils, balance, and cold precision. She slipped on the calibration glove, let it sink, and felt the faint tingling of neural alignment. Thib peered closer. That's a kinetic weapon? With a single round? Technically half a round, she replied. Didn't have enough tungsten. Thib made a sound that translated to a nervous cough in 7 species. Do you understand who that is? He gestured across the field where Karoth had just vaporized a training dummy with a warm-up snort. Ellie finally turned to face him. Her eyes were calm, dark, and quietly amused. Do you? On the other side of the crucible, Karoth was performing the pre-combat ritual of his people, which involved stomping in concentric circles while chanting lines from the epic Gore of Ages, a work known for being legally classified as a weapon of mass boredom. After the 5th verse, he snapped the spines of 2 ceremonial enemies, grown specifically for the occasion, and raised them aloft. The crowd responded by pelting the field with glimmering shards of celebratory glass. The translation feed returned to the commentators. The human appears to be installing her weapon? Yabnob sounded incredulous. It is very small. She is also very small, noted the war philosopher dryly. Perhaps there is a metaphor at work. In the human quadrant of the galactic netstream, reactions varied. Earth's commentators were trying to sound upbeat, but even the most patriotic voices could only manage. Well, she's standing upright. That's promising. She hasn't died yet, a record. Back in the crucible, final preparations were beginning. The arena core pulsed, rotating the gravity zones on a randomizer cycle. Flaming platforms ignited. Holoprojections of former victors flickered in the background. Ghosts of champions passed, each with at least 4 arms and a tendency to yell things in Latin for no clear reason. Ellie double-checked her scope. No heat signature. No assistive overlay. Just glass, numbers, and muscle memory. She exhaled slowly, mentally counting off the interval between gravity shifts. Thib shuddered beside her. You don't seem afraid. I compartmentalize, she said. Oh, he buzzed. Is that a human martial technique? It's an emotional dysfunction, Ellie replied. But it works. At the center of the field, a levitating officiator, 6 eyes, 3 mouths, no clear bones, raised a luminous staff. Begin. A gong reverberated, impossibly deep, echoing through the marrow of every spectator. Karoth charged forward with the speed of a collapsing star, all 3 arms raised, weapons screaming. The ground cracked under his feet. Lava geysers erupted in synchronized bursts. A metallic platform detached from its moorings and spun wildly into the air, creating a makeshift hurricane of debris. Ellie took 1 step forward and then disappeared behind a rising wall. In the commentator booth, Yabnob screeched, "The human is fleeing." Or repositioning, said the philosopher, intrigued. Unorthodox. Possibly suicidal. Karoth roared. Come face me, soft thing. I will adorn my tusks with your tibia. He smashed the wall. It collapsed. Ellie was gone. The arena shifted. 0G began in Quadrant 3. Karoth's footing slipped, then adjusted. He pounded across the battlefield, scanning. His sensors pinged empty space. Heat signature, null. Audio, quiet hum of the environment. No target. The crowd's laughter turned uncertain. In a crevice near the arena's underbelly, Ellie lay still. She felt the rhythm of Karoth's movement through the vibrations in the alloy flooring. Her fingers flexed once. The glove was warm now, synced. She watched her heartbeat lower itself to sniper range. Breath. Shallow. Focus. Absolute. Just another shot, she thought. Like Delphi Ridge. Like Polar Crater 3. Just breathe. Just wait. Up above, the arena rotated, turning its axis 27 degrees. For a brief moment, Karoth's massive form stepped directly into the junction of 3 gravitational fields. Ellie's eye twitched. She knew what that meant. She rose, exhaled, and clicked the safety off. Karoth paused. Something flickered in the back of his mind. The ambient noise dimmed. The lights adjusted strangely. He turned. And then, nothing. A silence so sudden it felt like a slap. Then a single, perfect sound. The click of a human-made trigger. The round had not yet been fired. But the moment stretched, pregnant with its inevitability. Ellie looked through the scope, adjusted for wind drift, gravitational shear, and Karoth's modest ego shielding. Then she smiled, not because she liked what she was about to do, but because she'd already won. And all that remained was the telling. Ellie Voss wasn't born to be a sniper. She was born in a plastic box under an orange sky on a backwater moon called Cerberus 7, where the air tasted faintly of burnt copper and the rain sometimes hissed like it was disappointed in you. Her father was a hydrologist who studied water that refused to stay liquid, and her mother taught robotics to drones that refused to learn. By the time she was 5, Ellie could disassemble a Class 3 fusion engine. By 12, she had learned the most valuable skill anyone could have on Cerberus: how to vanish. She didn't vanish now, though she clearly could. Inside the gladiatorial prep chamber, where her opponent's war cries echoed like a bad opera through the reinforced alloy walls, Ellie sat on a crate labeled Nutrient Paste, Disputed Origin. Her expression was unreadable. Her posture, loose-limbed and unimpressed, made her look like someone waiting for their dentist, not their likely death. A small, twitchy monitor overhead showed Karoth's pre-battle routine in blurry holograph. He was still screaming the names of his ancestors while pulverizing something the size of a truck with his third arm. Traditional. She sipped from a hydration bulb. The flavor was supposed to be lemon. It wasn't. Behind her, the door hissed open and Thib scrambled in, all 6 limbs jangling with bureaucratic urgency. "You have exactly 7 minutes," he announced, clicking through a datapad, "to file any final death declarations, religious preferences, and— Wait, is that a coffee?" Ellie raised her eyebrows and sipped again. "Hydration. Sort of." "But you're not hydrating properly," Thib muttered. "The projections say your cortical stress levels should be—" He stopped, squinting at the readout. "Why is your stress rating flat?" "Because you're the one worrying," she said, checking her weapon's alignment. "That makes one of us." Thib made a noise like a deflating balloon. It wasn't courage. Not exactly. Ellie didn't feel brave. She didn't feel much at all, most days. Somewhere between a back-alley deployment in the frozen wastes of Kalen 3 and the scorched jungle of Vega Prime, her emotional thermocline had flattened. She wasn't numb. Just curated. Fear, like everything else, was a calculation. She ran a diagnostic scan on her neural glove. No lag. Connection solid. Muscle feedback tuned. Her rifle, affectionately named Matilda, gleamed under the prep light, despite its scuffed exterior. No fancy smart rounds. No adaptive AI. Just a hypercoil propulsion chamber, manual targeting, and a suppressor that whispered instead of barked. She'd fired it in silence more times than she could count, which was impressive, since Ellie counted everything. "Why do they keep mocking you?" Thib asked quietly. He wasn't being rude. Thib's species had no sarcasm gland. Their voices always sounded like they were asking for permission to exist. Ellie shrugged. "Because I'm human. Because I'm small. Because I don't roar. But surely they understand." "No," she cut in gently. "They don't. They see an apex predator with no claws. They see the wrong kind of evolution. Violence, to them, is about showmanship, volume, number of limbs." She gestured vaguely toward the ceiling. "Karoth weighs 400 kilos and has a ceremonial axe made of neutronium. He could crack this room open like a beer can." Of course they're laughing. "But you still agreed to this," Thib said, blinking with all 12 eyes. "I wasn't asked." That silenced him. Ellie finished her drink, tossed the bulb with absent precision into a bin across the room. She stood, stretched, and felt her spine pop satisfyingly into place. Her shoulders rolled forward and settled. In that moment, she didn't look human. She looked sculpted for velocity. Economical. Like something built for one function and designed by a god with no interest in excess. "They think we're ornamental," she said. "Who?" Thib asked, his carapace clicking nervously. "Everyone. The Korzek. The Consortium. The Federation. Even the Earth delegation. They sent me here because it was safer than saying no. Because losing quietly is better than fighting messily." "You plan to lose?" he asked, alarmed. "No," she replied, "but they expect me to." She picked up her rifle and slung it across her back. The magnetic clamps locked with a faint thump. Then she checked the bolt, toggled the suppressor, and ran a manual diagnostics override. It responded with a low-pitched tone, confirmation of readiness. Ellie looked at the readout. Barrel temperature, optimal. Recoil compensation, tuned. Round loaded, 1. Just 1. She was thinking about that, how little room for error she had, when the lights flickered. For a moment, the room dimmed to emergency red, then relit itself in pale green. A voice, neutral and officious, echoed over the chamber intercom. "Combatant Voss, you are requested at staging. All intercessions are concluded. Spectator volume at maximum. Estimated survival odds, 2%. Thib winced. "I told them not to include that statistic." Ellie grinned slightly. "I like it. Keeps me humble." He moved closer, hesitated. "There's a good chance your name will be recorded in the Galactic Loss Archives." "That's fine," she said. "So long as it's spelled correctly." They stared at each other for a second. Then, with a final anxious twitch, Thib handed her a tiny object, an old Terran military token, etched with faded coordinates and a name too worn to read. "What's this?" she asked. "A gift. It's traditional in my culture to offer something before a hopeless confrontation." Ellie turned it over in her hand. It was cool to the touch. Heavier than it looked. "I appreciate the gesture," she said. "It's already been reported to the Ethics Committee," he replied. She snorted. "Of course it has." Outside the chamber, the final countdown had begun. The arena was shifting, aligning itself for combat. Platforms rose from hidden vaults. Gravity fields stuttered and recalibrated. Whole zones of the crucible glowed with predictive violence. Somewhere far above, Karoth was being slathered in sacred ichor and receiving blessings from a priest who communicated exclusively via throat laser. Ellie rolled her neck once, opened the door, and stepped into the tunnel that led to the field. For a brief moment, all sound vanished. Not silence, just the absence of anything that mattered. It was always like this right before it began. The emptiness. The clarity. As if the universe held its breath to see whether she'd blink. She didn't blink. Her boots echoed along the corridor's curved floor, the surface alternating between smooth ceramic and pitted battle-scar metal. The lighting shifted every 10 meters, an effect designed to disorient some species, but Ellie had long ago learned to pace her vision, her breathing, even her thoughts. Let the noise pass through. Let the chaos slide by. The chamber opened at last, and she stepped out onto the staging ring. Above her, the Crucible's crowd erupted again. This time, she heard them differently. Not laughter. Not derision. Just noise. White and faceless and meaningless. She tuned it out. Across the field, Karoth raised all three of his arms in mock greeting. The announcers were already halfway through a bit about the odds of a human surviving beyond the first exchange. Something about entropy. Ellie lifted her visor. And Karoth paused. Just for a second. Just long enough to register that this wasn't an expression of hope. Or rage. Or resolve. It was an expression of someone who had already seen how this ended. Who had done the math. And who wasn't here to win, so much as to remove the question entirely. The timer ticked down. Karoth turned to face her fully, snorted, and slammed a weapon into the ground hard enough to crack the alloy beneath. Ellie checked her glove, confirmed one last time that everything was still perfectly calibrated. She flexed her fingers once. Slowly. There was no ceremony, no prayer, no chant. She simply stood there, ready. And for the first time since the match was announced, the Korzeks stopped laughing. They started watching. The countdown reached 0. And Ellie Voss smiled, not for them, not for Earth, not even for herself. But because somewhere in the back of her mind, in a cold and perfect chamber built of habit and scars, a voice whispered, "You're already in the crosshairs, big guy." And the fight hadn't even begun. Karothk the Unshattered had won his first blood duel at the age of 4, which was admittedly late by traditional Malgrothian standards. The priest judges of his homeworld had still marked the occasion with thunderous gongs and a celebratory immolation of a lesser cousin species. He was born beneath a sky that boiled with plasma storms and was weaned on fermented bone nectar. His heart was a fused triple-chamber organ that beat in asymmetric wartime. His bones were threaded with reactive carbon strands, not by augmentation, but by the violent pressures of his planet's gravitational tides. To say he was built for war was an insult to war itself. He now stood on the far edge of the Crucible's eastern launch gate, 3 meters tall, twice as wide, and draped in sacred bindings made of predator sinew and recycled admiral uniforms. The bindings were ceremonial. The muscle beneath was not. A hovering team of body priests and xenomystics orbited him like anxious moons, dabbing on ancestral oils, etching fresh kill glyphs across his left pectoral, and singing the 3 verses of the victory anthem in 5 incompatible keys. Karothk didn't move. His eyes, triple-slitted and bioluminescent, were fixed on the arena's main display, which currently showed a looped highlight reel of his previous fights. The reel included 9 fatalities, for severe organ inversions, and one opponent who had spontaneously combusted from what analysts later described as existential panic. He liked that one best. Karothk turned slightly, tilting his massive skull toward his translator drone. "Is the human armed?" "Yes, my sovereign crusher of vertebrae," the drone buzzed in precise Malgrothian formal register. "A single projectile weapon. Outdated by 3 epochs. Limited payload. Manually aimed." "Does she scream?" he asked. "Negative," replied the drone. "Shame," he muttered. The Crucible's announcer spun into frame then, suspended in a gravity-null cradle, his tentacles coiled around a floating microphone. He was a Flarned of House Chronovox, infamous for narrating an entire execution once while his own limbs were being dissolved. His voice was pure theater. "Sentience and sapience of the outer spiral," the announcer boomed, voice modulating for maximum dread. "Prepare yourselves for the final bout in this year's Grand Crucible Challenge. Representing the unified human diplomatic contingent, Ellie Mira Voss." 1,000 species murmured, snorted, chittered, or expelled vapor through bioluminescent gills. Some simply blinked in sequence. The universal sign for, "Wait, who?" On the viewing mezzanine, a diplomatic attaché from Earth watched grimly. He was already drafting his condolences in 2 galactic protocols and Esperanto. The betting boards flickered and updated. Odds were now 472:1 in favor of Karothk. One particularly enthusiastic Glibner had placed a wager not on Karothk winning, but on Ellie being reduced to particulate matter within 3.2 seconds. The Crucible permitted such bets, so long as cleanup fees were prepaid. Back in the arena, the fight prep drones descended. Each hovered with bureaucratic menace, scanning contestants, checking for unauthorized biomods, illicit toxins, psychic dampeners, or cloaked gods. Ellie stood calmly, arms raised, eyes on nothing in particular. The drones passed over her with a faint musical tone. No anomalies. Karothk, meanwhile, triggered 3 flags, 2 chemical enhancements, legal by ancestral right, and 1 unauthorized soul-binding trinket, which the officiator disqualified with a stern beep. "Shall we declare the rules?" the announcer called, more for show than sense. The crowd laughed in their own languages. Rules were, after all, more of a flavoring than a structure. Combatants will remain within the designated perimeter of the Crucible's adaptive zone, the announcer said. Gravitational shifts will occur at intervals determined by the Council of Carnage. Environmental hazards will remain semi-randomized. Deaths are final unless pre-cleared for resurrection protocols. Appeals must be filed before expiration. Karothk rolled his shoulders, cracked a third knuckle. Begin. But it was not time yet. Not quite. The arena itself was adjusting. Massive hexagonal tiles ground into place under Ellie's feet, rotating with slow tectonic grace. Biomes flickered around the edges of the field: lava vents, electric fog, flash-freeze zones, spike fields, memory clouds. Each quarter of the crucible shimmered with a different threat. It was random, supposedly. Except randomness had a bias, and bias often had politics. Humans, being new to the scene, were afforded minimal lobbyist protections. One glance confirmed it. Ellie's side was a gravity slick, uneven magnetic pulses that threw footing off balance, aimed to disorient and humiliate. She stepped into it like she was stepping into a crosswalk. No complaint. No hesitation. Her boots adjusted silently, Euro-calibrated. Karothk's side, naturally, was stable. Across the arena, a cluster of tentacled youth from the Glorim race were chanting Karothk's name in synchrony, their collective skin flashing yellow-green in triumph pattern. The other spectators, many of whom had seen Karothk shatter armor-plated species with a single overhand smash, were getting impatient. The crowd wanted gore. They wanted spectacle. They wanted to see what happened when a fragile, bipedal anomaly from the Milky Way tried to square up to a god of war. Ellie adjusted her gloves. The neural threads along her forearms sparked once. A microdose of stimulant released into her bloodstream, precise and measured. Her heartbeat held steady. Karothk growled. The arena floor beneath him dented. Then the announcer called the final count. Combatants, mark. Ellie took a single breath. Begin. The crucible roared to life. Karothk moved first, of course. Always the showman. He charged forward with a sound like mountains colliding, each footstep hammering the tiles into the floor. Dust sprayed from the seams. His war cry echoed through the arena, an ancient guttural anthem that translated loosely to "May your intestines remember me." Ellie didn't move. Not at first. The crowd watched, puzzled, then stunned, then howling. Because she wasn't dodging. She was measuring. Karothk closed the distance. 40 meters. 20. 10. Ellie's fingers twitched. Matilda, her rifle, swung into her hands in a single liquid motion. Not a flourish. A calculation. Wind speed negligible. Gravity fluctuating at 0.89 local g. Target. Full sprint, slightly left heavy, telegraphing a downward arc. She had one shot. She took it. The rifle whispered. A crack of displaced air, nothing more. No recoil, no spark. And then Karothk stopped. Dead still, mid-charge. Confused. One of his arms dropped. The crowd went silent. Then the blood began. It came not as a burst but a sheet, sliding down his side in a single smooth wave. The joint had been severed at the precise point where synthetic tendon met natural armor. Not shattered. Not destroyed. Disabled. Karothk staggered, bellowing not in rage, but disbelief. Ellie shifted position by half a step, boots skating against the gravity field like a dancer on magnets. Matilda tracked him, her muzzle never wavering. This time, the crowd leaned forward. Karothk howled again, but something in it had changed. There was doubt now. Uncertainty. He spun, bringing his remaining weapons to bear, his movements slightly off balance. Blood slicked the tiles beneath him. The oil from his bindings burned in the atmosphere, sending acrid smoke curling around his shoulders. Ellie held position. Let him come. Let him think the next move was his. It was never his. And Karothk began to understand that. One more step, and the crucible's adaptive zone shifted. A spike of magnetic torque twisted his footing, just slightly, just enough. He stumbled. Ellie's second shot came, not at his heart, not at his head, but at the floor, right beneath his lead foot. It detonated in a silent burst, flinging the tile upward in a localized kinetic blast. Karothk tumbled. Not gracefully. He fell hard, the full mass of his war-forged body slamming into the arena floor with seismic force. Tiles cracked. The lights above flickered. The crowd, stunned into quiet, did not cheer. They didn't know what to do with this. Because this wasn't spectacle. This was precision. Ellie stepped forward, rifle low, expression unchanged. Karoth, gasping, bleeding, stared up at her. For a second, something human flickered across his face. Recognition. He opened his mouth. But whatever he was about to say, or roar, or claim, the announcer cut in. "Hold!" he yelled. "Combatants, freeze. Protocol override." Even the crowd groaned. But rules, it seemed, did still matter to someone. The judges needed a review. Was it lethal? Was it dishonorable? Was it too clean? Ellie turned slightly, weapon held casually in one hand. The targeting system winked green. She hadn't missed. Not even once. And Karoth, the unshattered, lay broken beneath her, awaiting judgment. The crucible paused in a silence so deep it felt like the arena itself had stopped breathing. Above the field, the massive holoscreens flickered between camera angles, one displaying Ellie's calm, unhurried stance, the other panning across Karoth's toppled bulk, his single functioning arm pressed against the floor like a dying sun god trying to rise. Judges conferred in a separate subdimensional bubble. Timed their move differently, ostensibly to ensure fairness, though most suspected it allowed for strategic diplomacy. The screens displayed the bureaucratic seal of the Galactic Combat Authority, a rotating cube of cosmic equations and an apologetic shrug. Ellie exhaled through her nose, adjusting the grip on her rifle without raising it. Her eyes scanned Karoth. Not with pity, not even curiosity, just precision. A muscle in her jaw ticked once. She was calculating. Around her, gravity tilted again, a subtle twist like the crucible was testing her posture. She didn't react. Years of sniper training had trained her body to interpret space not as limitation but as variable. Every pressure shift, every altered inertia, was just one more number in a running equation. Across the field, Karoth stirred. The fall had taken more from him than he'd admit, probably cracked a rib cluster, maybe displaced one of his auxiliary lungs. Blood continued to pour in thick, radiant strands. Still, his eyes had not dimmed. Rage hadn't left him. It had only learned to limp. He rose, slowly, groaning like tectonic plates grinding toward collision. One leg gave out, he corrected. His breathing was shallow. Even now, he tried to loom. The hollow decree blinked into place. Combat may resume. Below it, non-lethal engagement confirmed. Fight continues. The crowd erupted in a cacophony of confusion, bloodlust, and anticipation. Wagers shifted like storm tides. Several watchers had bet on a fast death, but this slow, technical dismantling was shaking the very bones of Crucible tradition. Karoth growled, wiping blood across his mouth. He bared his teeth. "You bleed well," Ellie said. Her voice carried, not loud, but effortlessly clear, amplified by her suit's calm relay. It wasn't mockery. It was clinical acknowledgement. Karoth lunged. Even wounded, he moved like a kinetic avalanche. His shoulder cannon flared to life, its targeting systems still intact. Plasma shot past Ellie in a horizontal arc that incinerated 3 tiles and partially melted the viewing barrier behind her. The crowd roared. She ducked low, moved laterally in one seamless motion, and fired back, not at him, but again at the floor. The tile beneath him cracked, then exploded upward with a focused directional charge. He buckled again, stumbled sideways into the crucible's lava vent quadrant. Heat shimmered. The floor hissed. Now came the change in rhythm. Ellie advanced, not recklessly, but like a ghost between pulses of light. She used the arena's disorientation against him, the flickering gravity, the unpredictable terrain. Where Karoth fought like a hammer seeking a nail, she fought like a scalpel wielded by a surgeon who'd already done the autopsy. Karoth spun, attempting a wide-angle strike with his functional arm. She ducked, let it pass overhead, then triggered a single round into his exo-hip. Something snapped. He roared, half from pain, half from the deep animal understanding that he was being undone. Ellie landed 2 more shots, one to disable his sensory ridge, the other at his anchor knee. The massive alien collapsed. This time, he didn't get up. The crucible fell deathly quiet. Again. Ellie walked to within 5 meters, rifle still trained but not fired. Her movements had the grace of inevitability. She could have ended it there. One more shot, center mass, or something more poetic. A headshot. A heart chamber. Something final. But she didn't. Instead, she spoke. Target neutralized. The announcer hovered forward hesitantly. Even his many-eyed face was unreadable. Ellie Voss, of the Unified Human Contingent, has disabled her opponent without terminal force. Does she request a final strike? A pause. Her gaze didn't leave Karothk, who blinked slowly, gasping through clenched jaws. No, she said. The word fell like a bullet into water. No final strike requested, repeated the announcer, now clearly scrambling for protocol. Victory by disarmament and incapacitation. By ancient crucible law, the human wins. Silence broke into chaos. There was no eruption of joy. Not yet. The crowd had been expecting entrails. Instead, they had been handed precision and control, the kind that rewrote definitions. On the council balcony, several dignitaries blinked in tight synchrony, an expression of disbelief among the photonic vrats. A tentacled ambassador dropped its ceremonial wineglass. One of the betting officials quietly deactivated its own pancreas in protest. Ellie lowered her rifle. Karothk lay motionless, his body steaming, his mind whirring with a thought new and bitter to him. He'd been outplayed, and he would live to remember it. Ellie turned. She didn't bow, didn't wave, just walked, one boot after another, past the shattered floor tiles and sparking hazard zones, through the heart of a stunned coliseum that no longer saw her as weak or quaint, but something altogether more disquieting. She exited through the victor's gate. It closed behind her with a soft hiss. In the press zone, chaos exploded. Reporters from 100 worlds screamed questions across dimensions. Security bots struggled to maintain corridor integrity. On screens, slow-motion replays of her shots played on loop, arcs of grace, mathematics rendered violent. A flurry of internal comms pinged within the galactic diplomacy sphere. Earth's representative, until now regarded as little more than a junior race with charming cuisine and unfortunate skeleton fragility, found himself fielding requests for tactical alliances, biogenetic analysis, and several suspiciously friendly invitations to joint training maneuvers. Inside the Crucible's fighter recovery chamber, Ellie sat alone. She removed her gloves with care. Then her helmet. Her face, sweat-streaked but calm, reflected in the cold alloy wall. Matilda, the rifle, was lowered into its case. The door hissed again. A figure entered. Lieutenant Clan of the Arkan Collective, one of the few non-humans who had ever trained alongside Earth's Recon Corps. She held no clipboard, no translator. Just a flask and a raised brow. "Your angle on the floor shot," Clan said in perfect English. "You calculated the fault line?" "I guess the Crucible would optimize its tiling on symmetrical weight shift," Ellie replied, reaching for the flask. She sipped. Bitter. The rest was rhythm. Clan chuckled, sharp and clicking. "You just cost the Malgroth 6 trading systems and the primacy of bone. They'll survive. Eventually." Ellie stood, stretched her neck. "That's the point." Clan studied her. "Why didn't you finish him?" Ellie's face didn't shift. "He needed to remember. To fear you. No. To think twice next time." She started walking toward the exit tunnel. Clan followed. "Next time?" asked the lieutenant. "There's always a next time," Ellie said. The Crucible's outer lights dimmed. A bureaucratic drone flew overhead, nervously cataloging new policy mandates about non-lethal victories and the re-evaluation of emergent species. Ellie passed beneath it without pause. Outside, the crowd was no longer just watching. They were studying, calculating, reframing the human mythos. Once painted as underdogs, novelty acts with sentimentality and unpredictable charm, humans now wore a new silhouette. Precise, patient, utterly lethal without requiring brutality. Karoth's unconscious body was already being lifted by grav harness into a recovery tank. A lone Glibner child pressed a single bet voucher against the observation glass and blinked in slow realization. From across 1,000 star systems, war colleges would review the footage. Cadets would pause at the moment Ellie fired at the floor and not the foe. Historians would debate her restraint. Politicians would spin her control as diplomacy through discipline. And somewhere, deep beneath the noise, Ellie Voss would be a name whispered by those who thought themselves unbreakable. Back on Earth, in a bunker built beneath a diplomatic embassy disguised as an espresso bar, an old sniper instructor watched the footage on loop. He didn't smile. He just muttered, "Took her long enough." Ellie, meanwhile, was already being prepped for interviews she'd never attend, parades she'd never walk in, and ceremonies she'd miss while out on assignment. She'd done her job. The shot had landed. And in the galaxy's oldest arena, a myth had been replaced by a fact.